In the midst of the deadliest tornado that ripped the Woodward town in Oklahoma, a further tragedy was unfolding when a 4-year-old who survived the monstrous twister suddenly vanished and remains unaccounted for to this day. The enigmatic disappearance and probable abduction of Joan Gay Croft received national attention over the last 76 years and has been the subject of many theories, all devoid of a promising end. It remains as one of the most enduring missing children's cases of all time. In the month of April 1947, a poorly planned telephone operator strike was taking place in Woodward that essentially crippled all communications the town had with the outside world. One of the telephone operators was 26-year-old Cleta May Croft, the wife to 42-year-old Hutchinson Olin Croft, and the mother of 2 little girls, 4-year-old Joan Gay Croft and her half-sister Geraldine, 8 years old. On the evening of April 9th, when the strike was well into its 3rd day, the tornado, aiming to sweep along 3 states, took its worst mission when it crossed the borders of Oklahoma. As it reached a speed of 240 miles per hour, the tornado descended into the Woodward town. With no one on the switchboards to receive news of the impending doom, no warning was given to the 5,500 unsuspecting residents that the vicious F5 was making its way into the city. In a matter of 5 minutes, the deadly tornado demolished the vast majority of the town. It claimed the life of over 185 people across the borders, where 116 of them lived in or around Woodward, a reality that regards it as the deadliest tornado in the state's history. Among the unfortunate victims was Cleta May. The storm completely demolished the Croft residence, with a crushing wall instantly killing Cleta and critically injuring her husband Olin. Searching through the rumbles of the collapsed home, a neighbor managed to find their 2 girls who were trapped in the wreckage. Luckily, both suffered only minor cuts and bruises, although Joan Gay had a wound lodged in her leg. Being seriously injured, Olin had to be transferred to an Oklahoma City hospital. The only hospital available in town, equipped with just 28 beds, was unable to sustain the hundreds of casualties, and the more seriously injured were airlifted to hospitals in nearby Alva and Oklahoma City. Out of necessity, a hotel nearby was converted into a temporary hospital to provide bed space for the injured, and the Woodward Hospital turned its basement into a rescue shelter where patients with less life-threatening injuries were housed there, awaiting for treatment. Neighbors carried Joan and her sister through the wreckage of Woodward to the town's hospital, where hospital staff ushered them to the basement. Jerry received some cuts and bruises all over her body, where Joan Gay is believed to have had some facial abrasions and a pencil-sized wound pierced through her left calf. Jerry and Joan Gay's great-aunt named Ruth rushed to the hospital in her efforts to locate her missing family. She realized that Cleta May tragically lost her life and that Olin was seriously injured, so she immediately went to check on Joan Gay and Jerry to make sure that they were okay. The girls were crying when they saw their aunt and were repeatedly asking for their parents. Ruth tried to reassure them that their father was going to be okay, but she avoided informing them of their mother's death in the fear that she could cause more trauma to them. Before she went back up to look for other relatives, she promised to both girls that she would be back the next day. When daylight hit, Ruth went back to Woodward Hospital just as she promised to her nieces, but was faced with a strange reality. She couldn't locate Joan Gay anywhere and found her sister in a very distraught state. When asked where Joan Gay was, Jerry relayed a very bizarre story. She told Ruth that 2 men dressed in khaki military-style clothing with some sort of an official logo on it came down the basement in the middle of the night and took Joan Gay. When they picked her up, Joan Gay started crying and protesting that she didn't want to leave her sister behind. According to Jerry, the men reassured both her and Joan Gay that they would come straight back and bring her sister as well, but they never did. As Ruth later found out, a nurse who saw them carrying the upset child questioned them as to why they were taking her away. The two men explained how the hospital staff were too busy and overburdened with casualties, and that they were to take Joan Gay to another hospital in Oklahoma City where other relatives were waiting for her, and to treat the wood shot in her calf sooner. Many patients were transferred to other hospitals that night, and in the midst of chaos and panic, it is likely that the overwhelmed nurse didn't think twice when two of what seemed to be officials carrying Joan Gay clarified that they were just trying to help. But the mystery deepened when hospital staff later on insisted that the two men asked for Joan Gay Croft by name specifically. Jerry's story was initially not taken seriously, and everyone just assumed that Joan Gay was simply taken elsewhere for treatment. As the days were passing, and with the disaster more under control, the damage was assessed and residents were accounted for, except Joan Gay. It then became apparent that her sister Jerry had been telling the truth all along. She was taken away by two strangers, and sadly, that was the last time anyone has ever seen her. Over the course of the days after Joan Gay's disappearance, Ruth was effortlessly trying to locate her niece. She initially called the Oklahoma City hospital, only to find out that no one with the name Joan Gay Croft ever arrived, nor was she expected to. She then contacted hospitals in the surrounding area, orphanages, morgues and shelters, but Joan Gay was still nowhere to be found. Her name never surfaced on hospital lists or other institutions, and she wasn't with any family members. That was until Ruth received a dreadful call from the local mortician. At the time of her disappearance, Joan Gay was 4.5 years old and had light blue eyes and strawberry blonde hair. She was described as having a chunkier build for her age and was 41 inches tall. A few scars could help in her identification, including chickenpox scars on her forearms and 3 fading scars on her forehead. It is likely the injury she sustained on her left calf probably made a permanent scar. The Woodward morgue had the duty to organize the deceased so families could come in and painfully recognize and claim their loved ones. Within the shattered debris, the rescue teams found 3 unidentified deceased girls that no one came forward to claim, an 8-month-old and 2 older girls, with the eldest estimated to be around 10 to 12 years of age. The third body, a young blonde, blue-eyed girl of approximate age 3 to 4 years old, bore striking resemblance to Joan Gay, so the mortician asked Ruth to bring Joan Gay's clothes with her to the mortuary. When the mortician saw the clothes, he was convinced that the girl was not Joan Gay, as he found the clothes too big to fit the deceased child. Despite that, Ruth insisted to confirm this herself, and she did. She was certain that the body of the little girl was not her niece. Teachers from Woodward and the surrounding towns were coming in with enrollment books, trying to find out if one of the children could be matched with their records, but no luck. Over the years, some articles stated that the body of the 4-year-old was identified by neighbors as a girl who came from a broken home and was raised by her grandmother. Her grandmother refused to accept her death and never went to confirm that it was her. But in the end, sadly, no one ever came forward to identify the 3 young victims, who remain buried without a name to this day. Joan Gay's family launched an all-out search, including her father, who as soon as he recovered was heavily involved in the search. He and Joan Gay's grandfather went from town to town posting missing persons flyers everywhere. Olin was also giving interviews in radio stations and placing ads in the hopes to raise awareness. The Highway Patrol continuously searched for Joan Gay across 5 states, and the FBI also got involved. Despite all efforts, every new tip that came in always led to a dead end. The search for Joan Gay reached all the way to California when in June of 1947, just 2 months after the deadly tornado, a blonde little girl was found abandoned and badly beaten. She was dubbed as Little Miss X and was originally speculated to be the missing girl. That was until she was positively identified as 2-year-old Mary Jane Medlin, who was abused at home, and her mother and stepfather were eventually arrested for the crime. In 1993, the case took a new and briefly hopeful turn for the family when Unsolved Mysteries aired a segment dedicated to Joan Gay's case. After the show aired, over 200 calls were received by persons who either thought they could be Joan Gay or they recognized a woman that they believed to be her. One of the calls came from a woman who watched a rerun of the show and had many features pointing to the possibility of her being Joan Gay, including a scar on her left calf. She had even undergone hypnosis to surface any memories of her past in the hopes that she would remember something significant. But sadly, in the end, DNA testing confirmed no match to her or any of the other women who came forward. Robert Lee, a former news editor of the Woodward County Journal, had written many articles over the years devoted to Joan Gay's disappearance to honor the anniversary of her vanishing and to spread more awareness. On April 12, 1999, he received a strange email which read, "Mr. Lee, I know that you have written many articles about the 1947 Woodward tornado and about the missing Joan Gay Croft. How would you like to write an article about what really happened to Joan Gay and where she has been these past 54 years? She has been and is living in Oklahoma City off and on since 1956 under a different name with the full knowledge of her father, Orlin Croft. She even graduated from an Oklahoma City high school under her different name. If you want more information, please contact Joan Gay at email address Miss Joan Gay Croft." Robert responded to the email asking for more information, to which he received another email less than a month later that said, "Mr. Lee, I know this time of the year there are many people who crawl out of the woodwork claiming to be the lost girl, but I was never physically lost. My immediate family knew where I was. I just didn't know who I was. Until just lately, I never faced the fact that Cleta Croft, my mother, died upon me. I buried this information deep within my long-term memory and refused to accept. If you want to know the rest, email me at email address. We will arrange to meet in person to discuss the details. I propose we meet at Penn Square for the first meeting. I would like to meet in public, but not publicly and without photos. Please let me know a time and date convenient for you. I'm on the internet on most Monday, Wednesday, Friday between 9 and 10:30 a.m. As to compensation, I would prefer none. Yours, Joan Gay Croft." He replied affirmatively to her request but never received a response from that person again. Robert tried to send more emails, but all were undeliverable, suggesting the email address ceased to exist from one point onwards. The technology back then was not as advanced to permit any tracing of the email address, and to this day no one can affirm whether this was a legitimate reach out from a woman who believed to be Joan Gay, or if it was a hoax from an attention seeker. Another strange fact that should be noted is the way she was signing the name, as she added an E at the end of Gay, but Joan Gay's family used her name without the E. Could it be Joan Gay, and for some reason she became frightened to reveal herself? Or was it a heartless individual who decided to play a cruel joke? Many theories were put forth, each to his own right, to try and explain such a bizarre disappearance. No one has ever identified the two men, and what still remains a puzzling fact is that they asked for Joan Gay specifically by name. The disappearance of Joan Gay is heavily theorized to have premeditated kidnapping as a prime motive. Joan Gay was described as an exceptionally beautiful girl and was suggested that opportunistic predators who were watching her from before the tornado found the chaos to be a good opportunity for them to kidnap her. Another possibility where the chaotic aftermath would lend an opportunity would be a well-organized illegal adoption ring, such as the one run by Georgia Tan, who was known to mainly target blonde, blue-eyed children to illegally adopt them out. Although Georgia usually targeted poor families to avoid heavy investigations of the missing children, it could be that her people found a prospect in the frenzied first hours after the tornado to abduct Joan Gay and illegally adopt her to a family. It was also speculated that a childless family or parents who had lost their child in the tornado wanted a child so bad they made the decision to take Joan Gay and raise her as their own. This seems rather improbable since the disappearance happened only a few hours after the tornado and Joan Gay was asked specifically by name. If that were the case, how could a grieving family be able to gather themselves so quickly to abduct a specific child in such a manner? Joan Gay's family was not remarkably wealthy, but they lived a comfortable life and was thus assumed that she could have been taken for ransom. This view revealed a secondary edge in the theory, explaining why only Joan Gay was the target and not her older sister. Jerry was not Olin's biological daughter, but Clara's daughter from a previous marriage, and the kidnappers could have targeted Joan Gay specifically if they were aware of the fact. On the flip side, a monetary motive would presume her family to have immediate access to their money, something that was quite impossible during the immediate repercussions of the tornado, and no ransom note or call was ever received, making this possibility quite doubtful. A few had gone a step further to assert that the two men were after money but unintentionally killed Joan Gay, or she died due to an infection on her untreated wound, and the kidnappers abandoned their plans altogether. For the first few hours after the disaster, Olin's family, including Ruth, actually assumed Olin as one of the victims who died, but then they realized it was another man listed as dead who bared a very similar name and surname. Based on this, some proposed that perhaps Olin's family wished to raise Joan Gay since both her parents supposedly died, and after they realized this was not the case, they had hidden the fact that they had taken her. Or, if we take into account the strange emails that the editor received, could it be that the family somehow, and for some reason, hidden Joan Gay? I personally find that very unlikely, unless there was a strong motive to support as to why they would conceal her whereabouts from her very distraught and traumatized family. Some had gone as far as to speculate that Joan Gay wasn't Olin's biological daughter, and her real father organized the kidnapping to raise her on his own after Clara May died. But again, in my humble opinion, I find this highly improbable and perhaps far-fetched. It seems doubtful to manage to organize an abduction and its execution successfully under the circumstances, especially only just few hours after a massive F5 almost demolished the whole town, and there are no records to even suggest the notion that Joan Gay was not Olin's daughter. Joan Gay's family acknowledged that she spoke with a mild lisp, although some reports assert that she in fact had a speech impediment to the point that most could not understand her when she spoke. With that in mind, a theory that she was transferred to another hospital, but due to the speech impediment, staff recorded her name wrong, and then she either died and was buried under the wrong name, or that no one claimed her with the name they thought she had and was orphaned or adopted out as a result. One of the issues with this hypothesis is that her father always asserted that Joan Gay was a very shy child and would never talk to strangers at all, not even when they asked for her name. One cannot overlook the possibility that the two men were officials who had the task to transfer patients to other hospitals nearby and were only trying to help out. If that is the case, could it be that something happened on the way and Joan Gay died? If so, what happened to her body? Which brings us to the final theory. One cannot exclude the likelihood that the unidentified 4-year-old body was in fact Joan Gay, and she died either intentionally or unintentionally in the hands of her takers. Perhaps she was trying to run away from them and perished in her efforts to save her life. If we further speculate, there could be the slight prospect that in her aunt's distraught, exhausted stage and her inability to accept the fact, she possibly refused to see any resemblance between the girls. The highway patrol, heavily involved in the search, always circled back to this concept being the case. Unfortunately, the bodies of the 3 unidentified girls have yet to be exhumed for any testing and still remain buried in unmarked graves, but only DNA could include or exclude this theory. Olin remarried just 3 months after the disaster, and many viewed this as very strange as to how he could move on so quickly after his whole life came crashing down with the loss of his wife and daughter. Even so, Olin reportedly never gave up searching for answers and was always trying to raise more awareness regarding Joan Gay's vanishing up until his last breath in 1987. Ruth's daughter resubmitted DNA in the hopes of finding a match in the Cody system. Some sparse reports mentioned that Joan Gay's half-brothers from Olin's other marriages also submitted DNA in the system. Joan Gay's family has not seen her since that day 76 years ago. The last time anyone has seen her was the early hours of April 10, 1947. She was dressed in pink and blue sleeper, carried away by 2 strangers. If she's still alive today, she would be almost 81 years old. But sadly, no one can know for sure Joan Gay's ultimate fate, and with so much time passed and not much evidence to go on, but only speculations, it seems very hard to ever find out what truly happened to her. We can only hope that DNA advanced technology will someday solve her mystery. Her family never lost hope. They always felt in their hearts that Joan Gay was out there, somewhere. Until next time.